The business case for energy efficiency may seem straightforward. Reducing energy use will save a building owner money. However, implementing energy efficiency measures can also involve upfront costs. And these costs can be challenging for companies to justify when there are other competing priorities for funding. My name is Nicole Stika, and I'm the Vice President of Energy Services with the Greater Cleveland Partnership. I'm joined today by my colleague, Matt Haakenstad, Professional Engineer and CEM Certified Energy Manager and Senior Director Electric Services with our partner, World Kinect Energy. Today, we're discussing the business case for energy efficiency and how World Kinect Energy helps businesses improve their energy management. So Matt, I know World Kinect Energy works with a wide range of businesses, organizations, and especially manufacturers on energy-related issues. What topics are typically on their mind?
Thanks, Nicole. You know, reducing costs has always been important, but cost reduction seems even more critical right now as people manage through the pandemic. For some companies, this helps them stay in business if they've been adversely affected, for example, like the hospitality industry. On the other hand, some manufacturers and retailers are running extra shifts and they're using a lot more energy. In both cases, this begs for close management of energy spend, but for slightly different reasons. And many companies are starting to bring employees back into the office to some extent, which makes it more important to do this safely. Ventilation and HVAC systems can help reduce the risk of pathogen and virus transmission through various technologies and operating strategies. This can be addressed when we're analyzing the efficiency of the HVAC system. And even though we're hopefully approaching the end of this pandemic, organizations are well advised to prepare for something like this to happen again, since many experts predict that it will.
And so are there other benefits to this?
Well, one thing is that this frees up funds to retain staff and avoid layoffs if business is poor. And if business is good, it frees up funds to hire more talent, which, as we know, can be critical for growth. Reducing costs can also help businesses maintain their competitive edge, whether they compete with other firms locally or internationally. As you know, more and more business is international, so it makes sense to manage these costs that are under one's control.
Matt, you mentioned a minute ago energy. That's an input cost for many of our companies and our members. How do you suggest reducing energy cost?
Well, I'd start by working to improve the energy efficiency of the facility. A good starting point is to have GCP conduct an energy assessment at your facility. This should show you the breakout of the relative contribution of various equipment. Things like lighting, HVAC, motors and pumps, air compressors, that sort of thing. The audit will detail how these things contribute to your total bill. And it'll also provide suggestions called ECMs for reducing your energy spend. ECM is short for Energy Conservation Measure.
Thanks for mentioning the Greater Cleveland Partnership Energy Audit, Matt. As we know, no two energy audits are the same. Every building seems to be different. And we do provide those ECMs that start with a low to no cost and simpler behavioral changes. But many of the energy conservation measures do involve more capital intensive projects, such as smart controls, HVAC, and involve equipment replacement. There's a broad spectrum of ECMs, of course, for most commercial buildings. And for any First Energy customer, it's actually free for our team to go in and do that audit. And it's not an opportunity for us to sell you more equipment or get you hooked up with a new contractor because there is no obligation. But we want you to be able to have a long-term framework to understand your opportunities for energy efficiency. And Matt, so it's not always easy to justify the spending on energy efficiency improvements, as many companies have those competing needs for capital expenditures, right? And especially for projects that have a long-term payback. A lot of companies want to see an 18-month turnaround, and that's not always the case. So how do we help a company understand the financial case, especially when a piece of equipment or upgrade may have longer than an 18-month payback?
Those are great questions, Nicole. Reducing energy expenditures almost always makes sense, provided the projects are based on credible, verified calculations that reflect actual equipment operating profiles and energy input costs. You may have heard this before, but the cheapest kilowatt hour of electricity or a therm of natural gas is the one that you don't have to buy in the first place. So while some may tend to focus on payback periods of a year or two, it really does make sense to consider the true costs and benefits using a life cycle costing approach. This can open up many more possibilities just beyond the quick wins. And you can greatly reduce life cycle energy and maintenance costs while improving employee productivity and comfort, and you even reduce your carbon footprint.
So what type of a return should one expect from an energy efficiency project?
Yeah, the return is going to vary with the type of equipment, the cost of energy, the operating hours, stuff like that. So you need to pay attention to those things. But the return is generally pretty darn good. I mean, it's far better than many other investments that people make with their money. The ACEEE, the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, found that energy efficiency projects usually deliver an ROI, return on investment, in the 20 to 25% range on average. Now, that's similar to the return provided by small cap stocks, but it's at much less risk. ACEEE indicates the risk is about 1/5 of that of small cap stocks. In fact, the risk associated with energy efficiency projects is similar to the risk level of T-bills or bonds, but with a much higher return, like 5 to 10 times the ROI. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, that's definitely not a bad ROI. It might be worth a look for a company considering efficiency improvements. But it seems like all the talk right now is about renewable energy, such as solar. Is it a good idea to get solar? What do you do first? At what point in time do you make that determination that solar panels on your roof really can provide that financial business case?
I'm glad you brought that up, Nicole. The solar panels are definitely hot, and they're getting even hotter. And it seems you see them everywhere. And a lot of this is because the prices dropped so much over the past decade. But I'd still say you should start with an energy efficiency assessment, essentially a tune-up at square one. Otherwise, you might be installing more solar capacity than you need. People are familiar in general with what's happened to LED lighting costs and the huge energy savings LEDs can provide. So for example, if your building load is heavy on lighting, does it make sense to modernize your lighting system first so you only produce the power you really need to use on site? Even if you can sell the excess electricity back to the grid, you may not be getting the best price for that power. Now, this is a separate discussion on offtake and net metering issues that we really don't have time to get into here. But I will say that most consultants recommend not overbuilding the solar without having a firm commitment from an off-taker over an acceptable time frame that really fits within your risk profile.
So making sure your economics aren't upside down is critical, but solar is still a great option when it makes financial sense and the building has achieved those greater energy efficiencies. So Matt, talk to me about ESG, environmental, social, governance issues.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
That's a hot button today that we're hearing more about.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Nicole. ESG definitely comes into play. I mean, we're hearing about it a lot, and it provides two reasons to start with energy efficiency. For one thing, reducing energy consumption reduces both costs and carbon emissions, since nearly all grid-supplied electricity has carbon embedded in it. Now, you might say that this carbon portion is decreasing over time, since there's more wind and solar generation being added to the grid. But at the core of the grid, there's still a significant coal and natural gas baseload component. And I expect this to continue into the future. So it's really pretty simple. If you reduce your energy use, you will reduce your carbon footprint.
That's great. You said there's two reasons to start with energy efficiency though.
Yeah, good catch. So the second reason is also related to ESG, but in a slightly different way. The North American electric grid is having an increasing number of reliability events, things like outages, power quality issues. And the data shows this to be increasing over the past 10 to 20 years. Some of this is due to an aging grid infrastructure, since our power grid in the US is enormous and it was really the first large-scale grid in the world. And much of it really hasn't been kept up to date. Some of this is due to the fact that it's spread across so many different states. It's managed by thousands of different electric utilities, rural electric cooperatives, municipalities, and so on. And the other factor, though, is there's been an increase in weather events and volatility. These events are happening way more often than they used to. Things like storms, fires, floods, lots of nasty stuff, like, for example, what happened recently in Texas. This is the ESG connection. Because of this, more organizations are protecting their critical loads through some sort of a microgrid.
Matt, what's your definition of a microgrid?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. That's a good question. It's a term that gets thrown around a lot. A microgrid is generally a collection of DERs, which is short for distributed energy resources, that are integrated together by the customer, usually behind the meter. DERs can include things like solar panels, battery storage, natural gas or diesel engine, standby generators, combined heat and power, wind generation, even fuel cells. And then there has to be an intelligent control mechanism of some kind to manage and optimize these resources. So the microgrid is connected to the larger electric grid. In normal operation, the connection is open. That's so that power flows from the electric grid into the facility. However, if there's a disturbance on the electric grid, the microgrid has the ability to close this switch and separate from the main power grid, to island, if you will. And it can do this in a way so that the customer doesn't lose power, even if the utility grid goes dark. Now, there's a lot more to it than that, of course, but that's the gist of it.
And resiliency, as we know, is critical for many of our operations. So tell me more about these microgrids and critical loads.
So the first step is to identify the critical loads to be protected in the event that the grid goes dark. If they're spending money to install a generator, battery storage, or solar, switchgear controllers, they should make sure that they aren't protecting inefficient, energy-wasting equipment, right? Why protect energy use that really isn't necessary? So by right-sizing your electric and natural gas requirements, you also reduce your expenditure on protecting critical loads via a microgrid.
So sounds like you'd say investing in energy efficiency for resiliency, for reliability, redundancy, all of that obviously makes sense on many levels. Also from the financial to the environmental, making it a good place to start, right?
Yes, absolutely. Especially if one can tap into incentives for audits and equipment rebates. That really makes it hard to beat as an opportunity that addresses multiple issues at once.
Well, Matt, thank you. This is just a glimpse into our world in energy efficiency, how we work with businesses to improve their operations, reduce their costs, make them more efficient in how they're operating, but also for encouraging our businesses to think more proactively about their energy management and measuring it if they're not currently doing so. There's many resources and partners out there, just like our partners here with World Kinect Energy, to assist your company to become more efficient and sustainable. Between our GCP team and World Kinect Energy team, we'll put your business on the right path. Thank you for joining us today. And Matt, thank you as always for being an expert on energy efficiency.
Thank you, my pleasure.